I know that for some folks, this 23andMe situation already feels like old news and some are over it already. But with so much coming at us, I logged in today and saw another article, Delete Your Data was the headline. Then I also had a person I've done genetic genealogy for ask me about it. So I want to cover things again because there's a lot coming at all of us. But I wanted to focus on what some of the trusted voices in the genetic genealogy community are actually saying, and not just pointing here, read this article, but actually pulling some quotes. Also, I want to say my thoughts more clearly with additions to those earlier thoughts about the big picture. One thing to remember is this isn't just about offering generic advice. We are talking about our own DNA, the DNA of our family members, and all of the DNA tests that we happen to manage for other people. So when we're offering these perspectives, it's not just a detached opinion, it's personal to us. That kind of perspective matters. So I want to cover some of the most important things that stood out to me. Whether you're still deciding what to do or you've made your choice, I hope this helps you feel more informed. Let's walk through this. Leah Larkin, the DNA geek, in her article, 23andMe is reorganizing and it's okay, reminds us that the Attorney General didn't explicitly tell people to delete their data from the site. He was simply reminding everyone of their legal rights. Roberta Estes actually reminded folks that right now the situation is about 23andMe. It's not about Ancestry.com. It's not about FamilyTreeDNA.com or MyHeritage or any of the other sites. Mark McDermott of Genealogy Explained also clarified what bankruptcy means. He stated it doesn't mean that it's a shutdown, it means reorganization. The company continues to operate while seeking buyers or investors. Some have even pointed out that they've heard that the former CEO may even be considering buying the company back. But to echo what Roberta and even others like myself have said, download your data. That's just good genealogy housekeeping. And of course, I add, don't just download your raw DNA, get your ethnicity estimates, your DNA matches. If you've got a Y-DNA or mtDNA haplogroup profile on the site, download that. Download your tree, your records. Even go to Ancestry.com and download your parental side view. It's as simple as printing the page to PDF. Use the checklist that I created to help you download all of your data. These things are valuable and we don't want to lose them in any shuffle. Another thing that I want to point out is that I'd seen somebody post saying that one of the DNA tests that I manage, that person said delete my data, but because I had another DNA test under that profile that I was managing both with, it forced me to delete both of them. Well, there is a way where you can transfer one test to another account so that you can split them up and then you can delete the items from the person who said that they wanted to delete, and then you can retain the information for the person who said that they want to keep their information. So again, you have options. Let's also remember and think back to when Ancestry.com was sold. There wasn't quite this frenzy, but there was a lot of talk, but the community kept going and many of us are still using our DNA tests there. One of the things that I want us to all remember is that privacy concerns exist across all DNA testing sites, including places like GEDmatch. And it's not just about DNA. All of our data is vulnerable. Everything we search for online, what we watch on streaming platforms, what we shop for, where we drive, our digital fingerprint is already out there. So it's not just DNA data that we should all be concerned about. And as Blaine Bettinger reminds us, most of us disagree that your DNA is even your most private data. So as a reminder, we share most of our DNA with the rest of humanity. There's only a small amount that's uniquely ours. And even that DNA we share with children, with parents, with cousins, with aunts and uncles, etc. How many of you share your bank account with all those individuals? He said he'd much rather hand over his genome than his journals, his social security number, his bank account number, and so on. He also reminds us that, hey, for $99, 23andMe gave people access to their own DNA without even needing a gatekeeper. No doctor, no specialist or waiting room, just direct access to your DNA. Now here's another thing I want us all to remember. Why did we test in the first place? Many of us manage tests for elders or for people who've passed on. If we were to delete it from the sites, we can't retest it. And for those of us who are searching for information that connects us to our origins that may have been lost through enslavement, adoption, war, displacement, for those communities whose history was deliberately erased, DNA testing is priceless. We've seen people reconnect with birth families. People have identified parents of foundlings. People have traced families fractured by enslavement back to their African roots. People have solved cold cases, and people have even exonerated the innocent. People have given names to the nameless. So let's remember why we all started this. 23andMe has made huge strides in helping Black Americans connect to African DNA relatives. Some of the new tools that they offer even help estimate when that shared ancestor lived. That's groundbreaking. These are life-changing, generation-shifting discoveries. If all of those tests were deleted, we'd lose those connections and those answers. That's why I say I respect everyone's choice, but let's be real. Deleting your test doesn't erase your DNA. It doesn't erase the matches or the segments of DNA that you still share with thousands of other people. You're just making yourself maybe a little bit harder to find, and that's it. DNA is like a shared photo album. You might choose to remove your photo, but the rest of your family is still there in the picture. And one more thing that I like to put into perspective for folks is personal information about my family. I didn't get to choose that several of my relatives, including half siblings, cousins, first cousins, and even a half nephew, have their DNA in government databases due to felony convictions. I didn't choose that family members, including my own son, submitted DNA to the military as part of enlistment. And newborn screenings, those are collected by many states, and states who have varying policies about how long samples are kept, who can access them. I learned about the newborn screening data when my own granddaughter was born. I have cousins who've had children in California, and those descendants share DNA with me as well. My grandchild shares more, of course, but the children and grandchildren of my cousins also carry overlapping DNA. And despite California adopting some good laws and regulations, even they have had issues with allowing law enforcement access to those newborn databases, and not even databases like 23andMe. And while databases like CODIS or NDIS, the National Criminal DNA Index for law enforcement, or military DNA repositories, and different state newborn screening programs are currently restricted by law from broad public or commercial use, that's what's on the books today. But who's reviewing those restrictions for the future? Who's overseeing those databases long term? Who's managing them, governing them, or even petitioning for expanded access? So during this frenzied time, when people are finally paying close attention to where their DNA is stored and what DNA is stored, we also need to be thinking about all the other places our shared DNA is stored too. And what we really need to be paying attention to is the laws and regulations of today and tomorrow. We need to have a voice in what those laws become. This isn't a them issue, it's an us issue. Whether you've tested or not, whether you've uploaded or not, your DNA is still out there through family. The ship hasn't sailed, but it's definitely left the port. So should you panic? No. Don't panic, but don't ignore it either. Think it through, zoom out. The real danger is only focusing on today and not thinking long term, not seeing the bigger picture, and not having a voice in the laws and policies that shape what happens next. And yes, we do need stronger regulation. We can look to examples like the GDPR in Europe. They require explicit consent. Companies using their data. It gives people the right to delete their data and places real limits on how data can be used or sold. It would force companies to prioritize consent, security, and transparency, and it would make the system better for everyone, not just DNA data, but other data as well. The U.S. doesn't have that yet. Some states, like California, have passed stronger laws, but we do need nationwide protections to balance innovation with responsibility. Just like we learned to weigh risk versus reward when we chose to drive a car to work or school every day, or make decisions during COVID, we need to weigh those same factors here too. DNA testing has risks, but it also has purpose, and purpose deserves thought, not panic. Deleting can give you privacy, but it can also close the door to discovery. So instead of rushing to delete, let's focus on making informed decisions, choosing companies that respect consent, and advocating for better laws. And just like we learned during COVID, and just like we live with the choice every single time we get in a car, life is full of risks, but we weigh those risks for the sake of living, connecting, progressing. DNA testing is no different. We just have to become conscious drivers.